Imagine waking up every day with unshakable discipline. After over a decade as a peer-reviewed researcher in the behavioral sciences, I knew all the theory, but it wasn't until I put it into practice that I realized discipline doesn't have to be a struggle. In the past 7 months, I've gone from out of shape and struggling with productivity to losing 4% body fat, eating clean, and starting a thriving business. In this video, I'll break down the 4 steps I took so you can finally break through on achieving your goals. And the first of these steps is to start a small habit you know you can consistently follow through on, no matter how silly that activity seems. To make the larger, more complex habits we want to develop both sustainable and enjoyable, we need to start by building up something that social psychologists call self-efficacy, or more simply, the belief that if we take some action, we will get some specific result. And self-efficacy is powerful. Even doing something as simple as committing to take out the trash every day reinforces the subconscious self-talk, I am an effective person, and if I commit to do things, I will get results. And that's precisely why even starting consistent habits that seem a bit silly or weird are crucial for eventually becoming a true master of our self-discipline. For me, this is what the process looked like. Back in the beginning of January, a friend of mine recommended to me the book Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. In this book, Elrod introduces an acronym called SAVERS, each letter of which contains a habit he claims we should implement into our morning routine. S is for silence, A is for affirmations, V is for visualization, E is for exercise, R is for reading, and S is for scribe, or writing. I had heard of this book before, but simply put it somewhere way down on my list because I wrongly assumed that it wouldn't be that helpful. When I finally read it, I thought to myself, many of these ideas are things I've thought of trying before but never have. Why don't I start out by giving one of these a shot? And I think that was really key on my part. Although Elrod recommends doing all 6 of these SAVERS habits all together each morning, I kept in mind that idea of self-efficacy. And so I knew well enough that implementing tons of new habits all at once was never going to work for me long term. Are you pretty much the same way? Well, the research bears this out. And in fact, this is the central idea in one of the most well-known books on this topic, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Start with one small habit and gradually build upon it over time. Don't try to start multiple new habits at once. So then, which of these SAVERS habits from Elrod's book did I start out with? Well, that takes us to our next step in the process of building effortless discipline, scribing. Interestingly, I started with the last letters of the SAVERS acronym, scribe, which is essentially just journaling or simply free writing your thoughts. And this might be a good place for you to start too. But I'll admit it, when I started out journaling, I thought to myself, well, this is dumb. What kind of tangible results could I possibly get out of writing out my thoughts every morning? But I should have known better. Journaling has been shown extensively throughout the psychological literature to be extremely helpful for everything from anxiety and emotional regulation to helping us enhance our creativity and problem-solving ability. And so, starting from the beginning of January, I started consistently writing out my thoughts every morning, 5 days per week, for only about 10 to 15 minutes or even less. And admit it, don't you think this is a doable goal for you too? Well, it was this habit that improved my discipline and ultimately made it easy for me to stay disciplined. You see, in social cognitive theory, there's a model called reciprocal determinism, invented by the famous psychologist Albert Bandura. This model teaches us that there are 3 and only 3 factors that cause us to behave in any given way. And those are 1, cognition, 2, the environment, and 3, our own or others' behavior. So then think about it. Our cognition, or literally the thoughts and feelings we have, is extremely powerful, and journaling takes full advantage of this fact. As I started to journal, I felt more and more in control of how I was planning my day, who I was spending time with, and as problems and challenges in my life inevitably popped up, I was immediately able to have a dialogue with myself and start to write out solutions. And as the weeks went by, I started to slowly see myself as the kind of creative person who was in control of my emotions, my challenges, and my time. And wrapped up in this observation are the two key reasons we fall off the wagon and become undisciplined when it comes to our health habits, our learning habits, and our personal growth habits. And those two key reasons are: 1, lack of emotional control, and 2, failure to integrate the habit into our identity. If you reflect back on all the times you fell back into bad habits, isn't it true that one of these two factors was the reason? Well, I really started to understand this when I started the next of the habits in the SAVERS acronym, which is step 3 in the process of building effortless discipline. E for exercise. You see, January 2024 wasn't the first time I got started with exercise. Back when I first read Atomic Habits about 4 years ago, I did exactly what Clear suggested in the book. I took small steps. I would literally hop out of bed in the morning, do some simple floor exercises for about 10 minutes, or I would go outside and run for about 10 minutes. This worked out pretty well for a while, but then when it was raining outside or when I had a busy schedule that day, I easily made an excuse to skip my workout. Sound familiar? Well, worse yet, over several months, I only increased my workout time by about another 10 minutes. Something clearly wasn't working, and it truly was because I was missing the emotional regulation benefits of journaling that would enable me to track and monitor my results, adjust my routine, and think of creative solutions when things weren't working. But because of journaling, this time around in my efforts to exercise consistently, I lasted long enough with my exercising to make it to the point that I was able to avoid the second reason I mentioned we fail to become disciplined: the failure to integrate the habit into our identity. You see, when I started exercising this time around, my journaling made me realize that I needed to take advantage of another powerful factor in the model of reciprocal determinism we mentioned before: the environment. Through journaling, I got to know myself a bit better. I realized that if I'm around other people and fast-paced music, that energy would get me started exercising. And if the walk to get there was short enough, I would actually go. And little by little, I would discover new exercises to do, new machines to work on, and I would even make several new friends at the gym. People who are also like-minded and committed to their fitness journey. Again, it's the power of creating the right environment. And now, fast forward to today, I spend about 2 hours per day in the gym, plus I often do some additional walking and core exercises in the middle of the day. And because I could see gradual progress, it continued to motivate me. Have you ever had an experience like this, whether or not it was exercise? Well, again, I probably wouldn't have made it this far if it weren't for that journaling habit, plus another one I adopted shortly after journaling and exercising, and that is the 4th step in this process of building effortless discipline, the A in the SAVERS acronym, which stands for affirmations. Now, up to this point, I was no stranger to affirmations, or simply put, positive statements you say to yourself. I had been in the personal development world for years up to that point because of my involvement in direct sales, and so I was very familiar with reading affirmations, goal statements, and identity statements. But admittedly, it had also been a while since I reformulated and read an identity statement consistently. An identity statement is simply a short paragraph you write that's essentially a declaration of who you are and what you stand for, what your core values are, and often some of what you'll achieve or what you want your impact to be. It doesn't have to be fancy, it simply has to be true to you. How could your life start to change simply by writing one down and reading it daily? Along with my journaling and exercise, I chose to reformulate my identity statement and read it every morning to myself as I walked to the gym. Over time, this became almost like my meditation time, and I still keep this habit to this day. Even if it's just a quick read through, my identity statement keeps me focused on who I see myself as and what I stand for. But how did this habit help me start to experience discipline as effortless, and how can it do the same for you? Well, once again, let's review the 2 key reasons we fail to stay disciplined. 1, lack of emotional control, and and 2, failure to integrate the habit into our identity. Evidence from research into what's called self-consistency theory has shown that the clearer we are about our core values, standards, and sense of identity, the easier it is to act in accordance with them, and in fact, the harder it is to act against them. In simple terms, this implies something incredibly important. Bad habits become difficult and good habits become easy when they are part of our identity. And just imagine, what would your life be like if all your current bad habits were things you actually hated doing? Well, it's possible. And why? Because instead of having to push ourselves to do things, we simply become pulled by our identity. You see, I never started out thinking of myself as a hyper-muscular gym bro when I started exercising. I simply wanted to be healthy. But the more I read my identity statement each morning, the more in control of my thoughts and feelings I became from journaling, and the more consistent I was with exercise, I started to see tangible results. Not only was I losing fat and building muscle, but I was incredibly focused during the day. I got a tremendous amount of work done each day on my business and on my YouTube channel, and I suddenly started to see myself as this healthy, focused, and in control person. And so, was it really that hard to say no to junk food? Was it really so hard to start counting my calories and protein every day? Was it really so hard to get to bed earlier and do everything I possibly could to optimize my health, nutrition, focus, and productivity? No. It actually was and is easy. I literally have stopped wanting the bad habits. And if you start implementing even these 3 habits from Elrod's Savers concept, it's very likely you'll start to see similar results. But what about the other habits in this acronym? Don't those matter? Yes, they do. But keep in mind, I've chosen here the habits that made the most impact for me. Everyone might be a little different. Your starting point might be different. Your past experience might be different. Even your readiness for change might be different. And so, like me, don't be afraid to experiment a bit with different habits here until you get it right. Our entire goal, as Clear points out in Atomic Habits, is to develop what's called a keystone habit. A key habit that makes all other habits happen naturally or more easily. Ask yourself, what habit, even one outside of the Savers habits, could make the biggest impact on your overall discipline, productivity, and personal or professional growth? Start out with one that's the simplest for you to get started with, and as soon as possible. Try it out for 1 or 2 weeks consistently, and then start implementing the next habit. And one thing's for sure, I'd love to hear back from you on how it's going for you. Be open to the possibility that it will take some mistakes and failure to finally get it right, but in the end, you'll thank yourself for it. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact not only on your own life, but also on the lives of countless others, then be sure to watch this next video.